Well, it looked good. Possessor was written and directed by Brandon Cronenberg, son of David Cronenberg. This comes to us courtesy of Neon Studios, my favorite studio next to A24. It's making films today. And stars a cast that I had to write the names down so I didn't miss anybody. Sean Bean, Christopher Abbott, Tuppence Middleton, Megan Vincent, Rachel Crawford, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Andrea Riseborough, Daniel Park, and Hanukkah Talbot, as well as many others. And this tells the story of Andrea's character, Taz, who has a husband and son she loves very much, but doesn't live with them because she's very devoted to her work. But what is her work? Why doesn't she live with them? Well, she's distant because her work is particularly tough and weird. She works for a secret government agency, which I think is written into every single blood contract for a sci-fi horror movie, and has been since the beginning of time. But this secret government agency carries out high-price assassinations. If clients are willing to pay the money, they can have somebody else possess the body of the person they want to do the deed. And in the case that this is Taz, because she's the best of the best, and she carries the stuff out and then gets out before permanent brain damage sets in. Because, taking over somebody's body, it would have its consequences, and naturally consequences do come up a little bit later, as she's she gets very, very invested in doing this stuff, but also, it's starting to take its toll on her, as this stuff would. Now, I want to say right now that I've never been the biggest fan of David Cronenberg, and that may be a divisive opinion. I respect what he does, and I respect his dedication to doing good body horror and doing good sci-fi horror movies as far as good stories. He tries to come up with the dystopian future stuff, but also a way of putting the kind of dread in you and having some good atmospheric music and some really, really good atmosphere as far as like the tone of the film. And again, the body horror is pretty goddamn good. And you can tell his son has taken a lot of what his dad did in film and tried to apply it here. Some of it works. However, I do want to say that anybody that was saying that this is the best horror film of the year, I didn't feel that way. And I was very disappointed when this movie continued to play out. Now, I liked some of it. I thought the performances were pretty fucking goddamn good. That, however, doesn't mean necessarily that I cared as much for it as everybody else did. It seems like, judging by the reviews I read just before I started doing this review on IMDb and other places, that it was very, very divisive. Now, I did not hate this movie. I liked some of it, but I wouldn't go so far as to say this is a revolutionary, sci-fi horror movie. It does have good body horror effects and does have good performances. I thought, Christopher Abbott as Colin Tate was pretty goddamn good, and Tuppence Middleton was fucking phenomenal in this. But from the very beginning, as one assassination is carried out, and I'll get into spoilers here in a little bit, it's very obvious that they were going to go for good gore effects, and they did. And a lot of the effects were really practical, really well done. You could tell there was a dedication to with the cast and crew to their craft. They were doing a good job keeping it as practical as possible, and that part can be commended, and it really can. And everything around it, music, atmosphere, all that is pretty damn good. The thing is, the movie's ultimately very boring, and that's unfortunate because every good element suffers from the fact that they just don't have enough material, I think, to carry this thing out to about an hour and 40 minutes. Like, I liked a good amount of it, but in the middle, it really starts to suffer. There's a lot of walking scenes that really take forever. And I don't mind slow burn movies. Sci-fi horror, whatever. I don't mind slow burn movies. This was glacially paced. And unfortunately, I don't think had the desired effect that they thought it would. Now, it will be a movie that you either love, the most love, or they hate. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle on it, where I can't say that you shouldn't watch this. It is only $1.99 on Amazon Video, so I certainly didn't feel ripped off. Would have felt ripped off if I paid $20 for this. But when I saw that Neon Studios had something to do with it, and I saw that Tuppence Middleton was in it, I'm like, okay, cool. And I just wanted to see how this looked, because it really did look unique from the trailer. And there were unique elements with this. Taz has to basically be, has to take on this next contractor. She decides to infiltrate and take over this one guy, Colin, and make sure that he is the next heir to get this data mining company called Zuthru, which is like going to give them control or stuff like that. It's kind of a little obtuse with how it describes how, this is actually going to work. He's got to carry out this, or she's got to help him carry out this plot. Well, that doesn't end up working necessarily, and then it becomes a race of can she get out before any permanent brain damage happens, and what, who's really controlling who, and what does that really, what does it what does it all ultimately mean? And when you're left with more questions than answers and you can come up with some good scenarios, it's not the worst thing. And I wasn't frustrated by this, but ultimately I felt like a lot of this movie didn't deliver like I think they wanted to. Now, apparently there could be another version of this or a possible sequel that tells more of this story. And maybe when they put those two movies together, there will actually be a more cohesive story. There were elements of a good movie here, but ultimately I feel it didn't deliver. That being said, I can recommend that you do watch this, decide, for yourself, but it wasn't ultimately my favorite. So I'm going to get into spoilers here now, though. The performances are pretty damn good and the body horror effects are pretty good, but I'm going to get into spoilers, so quick. All right, spoilers right here. So, in the very beginning, Taz helps carry out this one thing where instead of using a pistol, she stabs a guy, and that was actually pretty good stabbing. That was, pretty good gore effects. Then she takes on this project, or takes on this contract to get to this guy calling her and get him to like take out everybody else. So she learns to talk like him, and she has 3 days before permanent brain damage sets in. Once again, I do want to compliment the music and the tone. It has a very, very nice, creepy dystopian future feel to it, which I liked. But ultimately, again, the movie suffers from just being too boring. And the job goes bad because her mind starts to basically fracture, because you can only possess somebody's mind so goddamn much before things start to go tits up. And Sean Bean, who kind of heads this whole company, manages to survive a whole goddamn 10 minutes or 15 minutes before dying. New record for Sean Bean here once he appears on screen. To boredom, he says. He does a toast, and that actually kind of summarizes the rest of the movie. There's, there's like some good, fights and stuff like that as far as like, what leads to like people being dispatched. Sean Bean gets stabbed through the eye and the mouth with a fire poker, which is actually pretty goddamn gory. And that was some pretty good stuff. And then, well, the woman he's with, who happens to be the daughter of Sean Bean, sees this, and Colin has to shoot her. Things go a lot crazy. So who's really doing this? Is it Colin or is it Taz who's doing this? And then he basically takes out the brain implant thing. It's this cord that goes in your head that helps transmit information and keeps you locked in without being too locked in. And then he goes to an ex, Rita, but he goes to her house because he can't go home because he killed people, and then he ends up killing her and ends up killing a coworker that arrived earlier that was actually not his coworker, that was somebody that was going to help get her out before things, got even worse. And well, yeah, he ends up killing her. He ends up killing him, and then goes on more of a rampage. Gets to Taz's house, kills the husband, kills the son, but the son had stabbed him, so everything ends in fucking bloodshed. That's really what it comes down to. But they had Taz and Colin had a bit of a heart-to-heart, so to speak. She's like, no, you're in control. I'm not in control. You're in control. So it's a mind meld thing. Who's really fucking doing this? Who the fuck knows? They don't really answer anything, and I wasn't even so much annoyed. I was just like, okay, I'm just like doing this. Like, I'm enjoying some of it, but I'm not really enjoying a lot of it. And it was actually kind of cool how he dispatched the husband, Taz's husband, by, getting him with a meat cleaver, chopped off his fingers and stuff like that. Again, the practical effects should be commended. But ultimately, this movie just feels like it was just glacially paced, and while there were good elements, it just felt like it just didn't work for me ultimately. I will give it a C+, because the performances and the gore effects were really, really nice, and the tone worked, but it was just ultimately very boring, and I couldn't get into it as much, and I think that's the unfortunate thing about Cronenberg movies. Sometimes they're good. Other times I feel like, there's an acquired taste for them, and I feel that he got the acquired taste part of his dad's talents. That doesn't mean that he shouldn't keep making movies, because he's got talent, but C+ ultimately. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Retlin. I'll see you soon.